Alright, hey guys, I'm back. No more robot voice this time. It's just little old me and my dry voice, not drug voice, just my dry voice. But anyway, hey guys, this is Sleek Buccaneer. I am here with a different kind of theory actually. So I'm going to talk about this movie called The Mummy. So I've watched the movie The Mummy a bunch of times, like over and over. It's like one of my favorite movies of all time. And I actually bought the DVD set for it. So what I wanted to discuss this time was how I believe that Ardeth Bay, the character played by Oded Fair, is actually not a Medjai. So to start this off, let me turn your attention to the scene where Dr. Terrence and Ardeth sort of introduce themselves to O'Connell's group. Dr. Terrence tells everyone that he and Ardeth are part of a secret society that swore at manhood to continue this ancient mission of preventing Imhotep from resurrecting. Historically, secret societies have been deeply interlinked with the concept of an all-male warrior society from pre-modern cultures. They're generally defined as an organization whose inner functioning is concealed from the public eye, but who might maintain a public presence depending on the level of secrecy required. To sum this up and bring me to my point, the Medjai and the Mummy universe had actually evolved from being a group of bodyguards for the royal court 3,000 plus years prior to the movie's events into a secret society in the modern era relative to the late 1920s and early 1930s. And there's only one problem with this: the number of Medjai that could actually form the secret society. Let's go over the opening narrative as said by the mysterious Ardeth Bay. There were less than 20 or so Medjai soldiers at Thebes and Amunaptra who followed and stopped Imhotep, meaning only those few men could form the society. So let's take this a step further and recall the secret message Ardeth said to O'Connell when they were arming themselves in the back of Rick's car at the British Museum in London. Rick somehow was directly connected to the ancient bodyguards 5,000 years in the past, not the Medjai from 3,000 years ago, or the early 1930s, via the tattoo on his wrist. The passage Ardeth recited to reveal this, however, opened my eyes to something interesting. At some point in the Medjai history, certain key members in the royal court were assigned to be protectors of these powerful artifacts, and bodyguards were given to them to assist in this endeavor. Rick was one of the bodyguards who not only helped Princess Nefertiti, but was also the one chosen to wield the scepter of Osiris to send the Scorpion King back to the underworld. These bodyguards were referred to as sacred Medjai by Ardeth Bay himself. This would mean that there were, I'll say, two divisions of the Medjai: the bodyguards of the pharaoh and the bodyguards of Nefertiti in another part of Thebes. Only 3 bodyguards were seen around Evie, the 2 that guarded the bracelet of Anubis, and supposedly Rick's predecessor. That still puts us at less than 20 men. But 3 of those men are part of a different subdivision of the Medjai group. So let's just say 15 men were the basic foundation of the Medjai as a whole. 12 of them evolved into the 12 tribes that Ardeth commands, and 3 of them evolved and expanded their roots to America, where they found Rick at an orphanage. Out of those 15 men, Ardeth never mentioned being so much as related to any of them. The 12 commanders aren't relatives from the looks of it, and it didn't seem like he knew the other division still existed in The Mummy Returns. He had to know of their origin and duties as the chieftain, of course, but if I had to guess, he doesn't truly know them personally. And there's a distinct reason for this. Let's quickly look into the actual history of the Medjai. If you do a quick Google search, not much is really written on Medjai, but there is a location where bodyguards of the pharaoh did exist and live: Nubian territory. Nubian culture is directly influenced by Egyptian culture. They had pharaohs of their own, along with skilled soldiers. If you look throughout all recorded histories, soldiers weren't prestigious in any way. They're always below noblemen and even clergymen or high priests. The only soldiers who were ever well off were warlords like Charlemagne or Alexander the Great. Think back to the movies Gladiator and Troy. Maximus lived in a beautiful village, but he was well liked by the king and close to his family. The king passed down his title as emperor to him instead of his own son. Achilles served no king, but lived on a beautiful countryside with his mother. He was outright called a warlord favored by the gods by Agamemnon. Even Hector, Achilles' mortal enemy, was a legitimate warlord, being both the prince of Troy and the general of the Trojan army, and the best soldier in the Trojan army. Now look closely at Ardeth Bay. When you first see him, his horse is decorated with tassels over its eyes. This notably is a show of prestige and higher rank. Over time, in both movies where he appears, you learn that he has knowledge and fluency of the English language. His men are capable of using both guns and swords,
And while impressed by the amount of gold hidden in Hamunaptra, he doesn't show interest in trying to take any for himself. His clothes are decorated with silver, and he seems to be familiar with the London area and their modes of transportation, with exception to Izzy's dirigible. So what does all of this mean, and why should we care? Well, I'm glad you asked. You see, your everyday soldier back in ancient times typically was not educated. Only those who worked at the church and those born of royalty were ever properly educated. Lucky for us, that changed over time. Charlemagne is one of very few warlords who promoted public education. As the British conquered new lands, their educational efforts were somewhat forced on natives. I say somewhat because not all countrymen were told to learn arithmetic or English when they were dictated by a new ruler. Only children of special interest, and even some adults of special interest, were allowed to learn about their new masters. Basically, what I'm saying here is that Ardeth was a child of special interest, a quick learner, if you will. He learned how to speak English and use guns in either his youth or early adulthood. And I'm guessing somewhere around teenage years to early adulthood because of his accent. The fact that he knew the London area a little bit tells me that he was one of few Medjai or even Egyptian natives to receive a higher education at a university. In fact, it was probably encouraged by his parents or family because he would then master a significant level of espionage and understand the importance of the second division of Medjai soldiers. Or he was sent away to perhaps find the members of the other division because they were choosing new members from the West instead of in-house. And as a coming of age or coming of title mission, he was sent to university. Now that's quite a lot to take in, so I'll let that digest for a second. But how does that tie in with history, or this theory? Everything you said so far just implies that Ardeth is knowledgeable of his society. Alright, let's see if this will convince you. How about the opening narrative of the movie? Ardeth is telling this story from a perspective you wouldn't expect from a Medjai soldier, one of the men who were outside of the palace and didn't see what happened to the pharaoh until he was found dead on the ground. Or really the floor. The soldiers wouldn't have known anything about Imhotep helping Anck-su-namun kill Seti I. Only Nefertiti would know because she saw the whole thing from the opposite side of the castle, and even then, the Medjai would need time to investigate where Imhotep had gone to hide, and where he would be headed. That's a story in and of itself. There's no way Ardeth, a notable leader of the Medjai society, would leave that part of the story out. In fact, that should have been front and center, if he was truly a Medjai. Not even his predecessors would leave out the secret passages or shortcuts or training of the Medjai from those years ago, because that's what started the foundation of his society as he knows it. So why would he? Because he's not telling the story from the Medjai's perspective. He's telling this perspective from the royal court member's perspective. But who in the royal court would be so close to Seti I on that sort of level? So let me drop some wisdom on you. Look at his social status as a chieftain. I already mentioned his clothes, level of education, and knowledge of multiple weapon use. Let's look at the silver embroidery itself. Silver typically represents modernization of a civilization and elegance, meaning the Medjai society is actually equivalent to a modernized city. They wouldn't classify as a third world society. Look at how many men were in his campaign against the army of Anubis. There were men in the thousands. No competent warlord would have so many men in battle unless absolutely necessary. Throughout all of recorded history, warlords typically had their most powerful and most trusted soldiers beside them in any battle. The size of the opponent's army hardly factored in as a disadvantage for a warlord's army. Look at the movie Troy again. Agamemnon's army had 1,000 ships in his fleet, with an average of 50 men on each ship. That's 50,000 Greeks against the few thousand Trojans. And the Trojans chased them back because Agamemnon was a poor strategist. Unlike Achilles, who dominated the Trojan beach with only 50 men, and King Odysseus, who was well known for his cunning. Ardeth lost a good portion of his men in his fight against the vanguard of Anubis, meaning he's not quite a strategist in battle like most warlords. Even when the Medjai tried to chase the diggers from Hamunaptra during the night, he still lost a number of men. An accomplished warlord or veteran soldier will go through every possibility before ever sending a certain number of men out to fight, especially if the opponents are English speaking and have a 90% chance of carrying a gun. Now I have one more point to raise, and after that I'll let you decide what Ardeth Bay truly is. Let's look at his animal companion, the pet falcon Horus, that he showcased as his most trusted and clever friend. His most trusted and clever friend. Now, I have a dog, and he's unbelievably sharp sometimes. I'm sure all pet parents have a special friend like a dog or kitty cat or parrot or even a ferret. But to trust a pet over the thousands of men you command is such a disconnect. You don't trust anyone in that massive army more than your pet falcon. What warlord would ever consider that? But that's not all. In Egyptian mythology, Horus was associated as the patron of pharaohs, a god who would normally be found watching over pharaohs like Athena for Odysseus. Even the Eye of Horus is a symbol of protection and royal power. Ardeth could have called his pet falcon any other name he wanted, but he chose the name of a deity that not only was once the symbol of all Egypt, but was an overseer of the pharaohs, not soldiers who protected pharaohs. Therefore, Ardeth Bay was never a descendant of strictly the Medjai. He was the descendant of a pharaoh, specifically a son of the pharaoh. The only question is which one, Nubian or Egyptian? That I will leave for you to answer.